Monday, September the 9th, 2024, I posted Anachronism 4456. It's called Pondering and Educated Guesses, yet another interlude. Back then, I wanted to live long enough to tell the stories of what I had no way to put into words, because it was also impossible to float somewhere outside of myself in order to see what people like to call the big picture of what is going on, of how sick I'd become, how emotionally, how mentally ill. It was a pre-pandemic deterioration, the worst of which I can now say occurred before I was literally kicked out of my ass, kicked to the curb, then wait what turns out to be this extraordinarily long duration, and then kicked out into the elements. The worst had already happened by the time I got to the second part, being literally removed from my home, and the trauma, I would like it to be understood that I do not take that word lightly, that would accompany it until I realized, even considerably after this less harrowing set of events began to occur, my memory, that dried up orange wedge that has always already made retrospection something so unlike, that seemed so seductively distinct, that I had taken to saying I write to remember, and that's why I take photographs too, had begun to malfunction just as it does for those whose memories are normal. And I had already been weaving these facsimiles together for a decade into what has evolved into this particular project, which, since that time, which I call the worst of it, years before the pandemic, dozens of months before losing my home of nearly 13 years, I've spent yet another near decade building this quilt made of me. All slapdash, wherein I can dive into it at whatever point, if for no other reason than the fundamental one of understanding illness as I never had, of the incredibly long process of healing, and the physical deterioration of simply living that can go on in simultaneity. One comes of age, one experiences tragedy, one gets sick, and at least in this case, even eventually heals. Slowly is always healing. And at the same time, one usually completely unaware of the pace, much less that all of this is ever happening, it is also significant. It is always, yet indefinitely, meaning also infinitely for you, me, the one who is involved, the victim, albeit finitely in the whole grand scheme of things, perhaps, or in theory, because one can never truly know, is dying.